There is a dark, unspoken reality to the life of an elite fighter that the flashing lights of the pay-per-view broadcast completely hide from the world. We look at these modern gladiators as indestructible machines, men and women who step inside a steel cage to trade their health for millions of dollars and worldwide glory. But what happens when the fight is over, the arena empties out, and the cameras stop rolling? That is exactly where the true danger begins. The biggest threat to a fighter's career almost never comes from the person standing across from them inside the octagon. It comes from the shadows of the outside world, where predators, parasites, and hidden traps wait for the exact moment an athlete lets their guard down. From psychological manipulation by complete strangers online to devastating public blindsides in their personal lives, the elite tier of combat sports has become an absolute minefield. Some of the sport's absolute greatest icons are currently finding themselves trapped in situations they never saw coming, proving that the world outside the cage is infinitely more dangerous than the one inside it. It takes only one split second of vulnerability, one wrong message opened in the middle of the night, or one loose comment on a hot microphone to completely tear down a legacy that took an entire lifetime to build. The illusion shattered for Volkan Oezdemir in the most devastating way possible, and it all started with a simple, unsuspecting message sitting in his Instagram direct messages. Back at the end of 2025, after competing in Qatar, the veteran light heavyweight was sitting at home, completely isolated and physically broken down while recovering from a brutal ankle surgery. That is when a man claiming to be a prominent healthcare professional based out of Switzerland slid into his digital inbox. At first, the man presented himself as nothing more than an affluent, highly passionate supporter of Volkan's career. When they finally met in person, the stranger didn't even mention sports. Instead, he painted an incredible picture of luxury and security, talking about high-level connections with deeply influential figures, massive investment opportunities waiting in one of the wealthy Gulf states, and a clear path to financial patronage after retirement. For a 36-year-old fighter looking down the barrel of the end of his athletic life, it sounded like the ultimate lifesaver. But during their next meeting, the entire trap was sprung. The businessman disappeared, and a predatory medical expert took his place. He looked at Volkan's surgically repaired ankle and offered a flawless recovery plan that would allegedly bring him back to peak physical condition in just 2 months. He pulled out a vial of a substance he sworn was completely safe, totally undetectable, and highly advanced. It was pure, unadulterated EPO. Volkan was told to keep the vial completely secret, and that very same evening, operating in absolute isolation, he made the biggest mistake of his life by administering the first injection. Just 3 days later, the combat sports anti-doping team arrived unexpectedly at his front door for a random test. By March, the results came back positive, and his reality completely changed. Facing a devastating reality, Volkan bypassed all excuses, cooperated fully with. While Volkan was dealing with the fallout of an undercover medical setup, future BMF champion Max Holloway was getting hit with an entirely different kind of blindside, one that came directly from social media and his own inner circle. A massive wave of public backlash recently exploded across the internet after an old interview clip from the Brotherly Time podcast resurfaced, featuring Max's wife, Alessa. In the clip, she openly laughs while explaining to the host that she completely ignored Max and left him on read for 5 entire years whenever he tried to interact with her. She explicitly stated that she had absolutely zero interest in him, ignoring his persistent messages and his constant appearances at her birthday parties, until she finally sat down, did her research, and realized that he was actually a massive superstar and a world champion inside the UFC. The moment that realization clicked, her attitude completely changed, and she finally decided to give him a chance. The internet reaction to this raw admission was immediate, brutal, and completely merciless. Prominent community voices like the MMA guru publicly went to war over the clip, questioning why the wives of all-time great sports legends feel this bizarre, unstoppable need to get behind a podcast microphone and completely humiliate their legendary husbands in front of millions of people for cheap online clout. Commentators threw Max's name into a tragic list of icons, alongside elite athletes like Steph Curry and Erling Haaland, whose private dynamics were picked apart by the public. Other fighters, including Ciryl Gane, reacted with absolute disgust, calling the situation the absolute peak of public humiliation. The consensus across the global fan base turned deeply toxic, with thousands of users pointing out the massive red flag of a partner openly admitting they didn't want a man until they realized exactly how famous and wealthy he actually was. The landscape of the middleweight division is shifting rapidly, and no one embodies that chaotic transition more than Kamaru Usman as he prepares for his absolute war against Dricus du Plessis. The former long-time, dominant king of the welterweight division has completely abandoned his old mindset of guarding a single-weight class, officially rebranding himself as a pure, mercenary moneyweight fighter. Usman explained his psychological evolution by stating that he no longer cares about the boundaries between 170 and 185 pounds, because he possesses the elite, multidimensional skill set required to dismantle anyone in either division if the financial package makes sense. He openly admitted that he is far from the biggest guy when he steps up to middleweight, and he even detailed the intense internal stress it takes to physically shrink his body down when he has to make the limit for welterweight. But to Usman, a true gladiator does not step outside with a scale and refuse a historic fight just because of a few pounds. He wanted the immediate lightweight title shot against Islam Makhachev, a fight he claims was actively discussed behind closed doors, but the corporate machinery of the UFC stepped in and redirected him toward du Plessis instead. Now, Usman is openly calling his shots, declaring that the moment he breaks du Plessis, he is going directly after Sean Strickland for the middleweight crown, or dropping back down to snatch the welterweight strap from Islam Makhachev. He is fighting completely unchained from traditional rankings, chasing the biggest paydays and the most dangerous legacy fights left on the board. While the rest of the roster scrambles for active contendership, the shadow of Jon Jones continues to hang heavily over the entire heavyweight ecosystem. In a highly anticipated sit-down interview with Ring magazine, the consensus greatest of all time sent shockwaves through the sport by explicitly leaving the door wide open for a dramatic return to action, confirming that he has deliberately chosen to remain inside the official drug testing pool despite his prolonged absence. Jones painted his current state as a period of deep patience, explaining that he is simply letting time fly while focusing his energy entirely on serving others. But he made it chillingly clear that if he feels a sudden, powerful calling from a higher power pulling him back toward the cage, he will answer that call without a single moment of hesitation. When the conversation shifted to the highly contentious heavyweight landscape, Jones dropped a massive bomb by confidently predicting that Ciryl Gane is going to completely dismantle and defeat the interim champion, Tom Aspinall. Jones argued that Gane's spectacular knockout victory over Alex Pereira did something monumental for his psychological confidence, shattering any lingering doubts. He even went as far as to claim that looking back at Gane's very first encounter with Aspinall, Gane was actually winning the fight and making Aspinall look human until a sudden shift occurred. According to Jones, Gane is entering his absolute prime with an all-time high level of confidence, and the rest of the world is severely underestimating what happens when that version of a striker gets unleashed. The ripples of that heavyweight analysis are already tearing through the light heavyweight division, especially with the UFC's official announcement of a massive co-main event for UFC Belgrade, pitting the legendary Jan Blachowicz against the rising force of Navajo Sterling. This high-stakes booking marks Jan's highly anticipated return to the cage following his controversial majority draw against Bogdan Guskov, and the former champion is coming back with a lot to say. In a recent interview breaking down the current state of the elite ranks, Blachowicz completely validated Ciryl Gane's triumph over Alex Pereira, shutting down any fan excuses regarding the finish. Jan stated bluntly that Pereira looked deeply compromised from the very opening bell, appearing significantly heavier, slower, and noticeably less sharp than he had ever been in his previous championship performances. Blachowicz refused to blame the loss on any illegal or controversial punches landed during the finishing sequence, stating that Gane was simply the vastly superior martial artist throughout the entire duration of the contest. According to Jan, Gane threw those devastating strikes simply because he smelled blood in the water and knew he had the absolute power to end the fight right then and there. This cold, Technical assessment from a former champion has completely flipped the betting lines and added an immense layer of tension to the upcoming Belgrade card, proving that old rivalries never truly die in the upper echelons of the sport. Meanwhile, the lightweight division is still reeling from the spectacular tactical execution that took place at UFC 329, where Paddy Pimblett completely silenced his harshest critics by securing a devastating submission victory over Benoit Saint-Denis. The internet has been flooded with breakdowns of the finish, but none have been as fascinating as the technical deconstruction provided by superstar Sean O'Malley. Showing exactly how the sequence unfolded, O'Malley explained that Saint-Denis made the fatal mistake of believing he could simply rush forward, slide to the outside, and crack Paddy with heavy hands. Instead, Pimblett was waiting with a cold, calculated trap. The very first movement Paddy made was wrapping his arm over the neck into an incredibly deep, high elbow position. Even when Saint-Denis attempted a high-level defensive roll to escape the immediate pressure, Paddy anticipated the movement flawlessly, trapping his opponent's arm to eliminate any leverage. From there, Pimblett locked into a vicious front facelock variation, driving his bare knuckles directly into the back of Saint-Denis's skull before applying an unbelievable amount of crushing pressure. O'Malley noted that the sheer torque applied to the neck completely shut down the blood flow, forcing Saint-Denis to lose consciousness in a matter of seconds. It was a massive statement performance that proved Pimblett's grappling is operating at an elite, highly dangerous level, transforming him from a viral media personality into a legitimate threat to the top 10. But no matter how many spectacular submissions or dominant title fights take place, the entire combat sports world inevitably loops back to the chaotic universe of Conor McGregor. The sport's biggest icon recently found himself locked in a furious war of words against his own fanbase following intense internet speculation that he had suffered a massive relapse into his old vices after his devastating loss to Max Holloway. The rumor mill started spinning at an uncontrollable pace after Conor uploaded a highly erratic video to his Instagram account reflecting on the defeat, leading thousands of fans to openly accuse him of being back on mind-altering substances. McGregor fired back with an intense, deeply defensive statement, swearing to the world that he is not, and will never, put any mind-altering elements into his body during this critical recovery phase. In a fascinating psychological admission, Conor explained that if the Holloway fight had gone differently, or if the fight had at least taken place under more favorable circumstances, he might have cracked the seal and fallen right back into that destructive cycle of addiction. But because the defeat was so definitive and painful, he is currently forced to undergo extreme discipline while awaiting his upcoming surgery. Conor insisted that he actually finds this state of absolute isolation and strict discipline highly enjoyable, but his actions tell a completely different story. Instead of looking at new contenders, McGregor is entirely obsessed with one specific man, publicly demanding that his next appearance inside the cage must be a rematch against Max Holloway, proving that he is completely desperate to rewrite the history of his biggest public downfall.